Hi guys, welcome back to Study of Architecture. Today, as our topic today is we have to learn about the history of architecture. Okay, you must be asking, what is history of architecture? Okay, as far as the study of educations, that the history of architecture is defined as it is the study of architecture. It's an involves of many centuries since from the beginning. The first architecture in the world was the Stone Age. Remember, I know that you have heard the word Stone Age. Stone Age is just only, you cannot see any structure there, no buildings, but it is made up of group of stones and formed into shelter to, to protect them from the enemies. So that is what we call start from the Stone Age. So that is where architecture history is being started. Okay, it is involved as centuries in the study of architecture. And it is also the history of all those great buildings, the old buildings in the century, landscaping, engineering, and architecture. And aside from those buildings and structures, we have also the history of those famous architects in the world. Now I will discuss who are those famous architects in the world. Okay, let's start from the first architect was okay. Frank Lloyd Wright is also the mentor of Louis Henry Sullivan. His early mentor, he helped form a uniquely American architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright is the premier school of architecture, which came out of the Midwest, the United States, and emphasizes horizontal lines to blend with the landscape. And famous example of the premier style home in the Ruby House. He completed in 1909. Frank Lloyd Wright took this idea further, however, and promoted what he called organic architecture. This firm refers to the using of both structure and materials to integrate designs with nature and the surrounding environment. Frank Lloyd Wright was em- embroiled in school in 1909 after he left his wife and family for his mistress. But his career eventually recovered and he would go on to design many of his signature masterpieces in 1935. He designed Falling Water, a home built over a waterfalls in southwestern Pennsylvania. Frank Lloyd Wright was also responsible for the innovative design of the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, which favors a rising spiral walkway rather than the involvement of floors. Okay. Okay, Frank Lloyd Wright was considered as the most famous architects in the world. And his first uh, space structure project was the Falling Water. The Falling Water is the most famous project he made in Pennsylvania, USA. Later, I will show you what are their works, the famous works. Okay, this architect's Frank Lloyd Wright is famous of his uh, what we call is organic. What do you mean by organic architecture? Organic architecture, it is a designs that he is a natural architect. He is not a false architect, but rather is a true architect. He uses the natural environment as his design. So that is how Frank Lloyd Wright works in his time. The next one is Frank Gehry Architects. He is also called as uh, a Canadian American architects. Okay, Canadian born architect. He was born in Canada. An architect and design Frank Gehry is best known of the Guggenheim Museum in Spain, and Louis Vuitton Foundation is in France, and the Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles, USA. Countless awards such as the Pritzker Architecture Prize and the Pinamian Imperial. So this is his life. Uh, he was born in February 28, 1929 in Canada. Okay. Frank Henry eventually became a leading force in the deconstructionist and postmodern style of architecture, as opposed to the rigid utilitarian tenderness of the international style. Geary explores also irregular forms and radical expressionships. He started gaining attentions in 1960s and 1970s when his line of furniture made of corrugated cardboard became suddenly popular. By the year 1990s, he honed his style and gained a reputation of designing seemingly organic, undulating, free-flowing structure. He designed the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain, which opened in 1997 and was meant to resemble both a ship and a living creature. He also designed the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles, California, which opened in 2003 and is known as only his unique structure but also superior acoustics. So this is the life of architect Frank Gehry. And one of his, see, dancing house. So I don't know why this is called a dancing house. Maybe because of the facade here, look like dancing, and the legs here. And this is the body of the structure, look like dancing. So this is what called dancing house in Parak. This one, House Museum in Bilbao. So this is also one of his famous works during his time. Oh, this one, see? Liu Mingpi, IMP, see? Liu Mingpi is born in China in the year 19 in the year 1917. Liu Mingpi came to the United States in the year 1930s to study architecture. However, by the time he graduated, he wasn't able to return to China due to what? Due to the outbreak of the World War II. Instead, he stayed in the United States, eventually becoming a citizen in 1954. In his work, P. strove to bring together the modern and traditional architecture, what he calls the impossible dream. His designs are considered a continuations of the international style popularized by the architects like Le Corbusier. However, he also known as for brutalism and offshore of the international style that used bold forms and utilization principles. For instance, Pitt's large rectangular concert block. He likes those used for the National Center of Atmosphere Research and completed in 1967 evidence of brutalism insurance. Okay, that is his life in his time and his project. So that's called the rock and roll house. See, look at this one. This is also one of his famous work in United States. He called this design as the rock and roll. So suddenly, also he came to Singapore and he designed his pyramid structure in Singapore recently at home. Okay, this is the Opera Park in Crichtonhowe. Look at also his design. He is also very good in concrete designs, a mixture of an organic materials made of concrete. Okay, look at this, the museum that he made in Berlin, Germany. So look at this one. He's also more of glass and concrete. Is still considered as an organic design. Ludwig Ludwig Mies van der Rohe was been a German-born American architect. He was commonly referred to as Mies in his surname, along with Alvar Aalto, Le Corbusier, Walter Gropius, and Frank Lloyd Wright. He is regarded as one of the pioneer of modernist architecture in the year 1930s. Mies van der Rohe was the last director of the Bauhaus, a groundbreaking school of modern arts, design, and architecture. So this is Ludwig Weiss van der Rohe. Okay, so okay, Louis Henry Sullivan. He is the first architect who designed architecture that forms the skyscraper. Okay, he was known for the principles of form follows functions. Louis Sullivan was anxious to break free from the traditions and become influential in foregoing distinctly American architecture. Similarly to Sir Christopher Wren, Sullivan benefited from the Great Fire. The Great Fire of 1871 in Chicago resulted in a constructions boom and afforded architects like Sullivan with works for the decade to become. Okay, this is one of his project in his time. Architect Louis Henry Sullivan. He is common known as the architect of the skyscraper. He built a skyscraper, the School of Chicago. Okay, stated here in his work, the limits of engineering considering tall buildings in the early 19th century, depending on the strength of the walls, until cheap, versatile steel was developed. It becomes quickly possible to create tall, slender building with a strong and relatively lightweight steel skeleton. The new steel with bearing frame also enabled the architects to include larger windows. Look at the design here. Have a very big windows with a composed of a composite columns in the form of an arcs. See, from the ground floor up to the last floor here. And those days, Antonio Gaudi's life is fueled by the faith of God and love of nature. He is a person who fell in love with nature. The Spanish architecture Antoni Gaudi developed a style all his own. He was born in 1852 in Catalonia region of Spain. Gaudi was a fervent Catholic who believed that he could glorify God by deriving his inspirations from nature, God's creations. Antonio Gaudi, taking his course from nature, favored curves rather than straight lines. So he loves curves. His most of his design is more of curves. It's not straight, it is more of curves, semicircles, half circles, something like that, rather than straight lines. So he prefers his design mostly uh, is in a curve in nature. So that is his styles. His unique and somewhat viceroy style was part new Gothic, part avant-garde, part of surrealistic. The architect that his work soon became synonymous synonymous with the city of Barcelona. However, in the 1920s and 1930s, his architectural design world famous international style, which starkly constructed Gaudi's philosophies. So if he wasn't until 1990s, Gaudi is a unique style that made him stand out from his peers. He he also took a different approach of designing his buildings, preferring to work in 3D models and opposed to drawing the plans of the buildings he intended to build. Some of his work includes the Sagrada Familia, Casa Mila, Park Güell, and Casa Batlló. So that is his life during this time. And okay, the next 10 architects famous in the whole world in those days was Michelangelo. Okay, so Michelangelo is famous in the name stated in the Bible. Although he is a famous today for its paintings and sculpture. Michelangelo also is a very talented architect in the year 1523 and being recommended by Pope Clemente II, commissioned Michelangelo to design a two-story library on top of a convent. His most famous contributions to architecture is the dome of Saint Peter Basilica. So he was a he was a great painter, sculptor, and become suddenly as an architect.